All right, well, welcome everybody to our Monday, November the 18th, 2024 combined work session business board meeting. I call the meeting to order and I call on our treasurer, Mr. Bertram, to call the roll.
Mrs. Ramsey Hunter.
Here.
Mr. Moore.
Here.
Mrs. Stewart.
Here.
Mrs. Schreiber.
Here.
Dr. Russo.
I'm here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, it brings us to the approval of a board member, Ms. Tara Ramsey Hunter. I'll call on our treasurer, Mr. Bertram, to lead the festivities, I guess. I don't know what you would call that ceremony. What's the adjective?
You will vote on her and then I will swear her in.
Okay, perfect. Is there a motion to approve Ms. Tara Ramsey Hunter to serve as a school board member, fulfilling the board vacancy through December 31st of 2024?
So moved. Second.
All right, any questions? There are none, then Mr. Bertram will take a vote.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart.
Yes.
Mrs. Schreiber.
Yes.
Dr. Russo.
Yes.
And Mrs. Ramsey Hunter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. At this time, we'll allow our treasurer to conduct the oath of office for our newly appointed school board member.
Please come forward. All right. Tell you what, if you stand over here, they want to snap pictures, they want to see your face now. All right,
You're gonna
raise
be on
your
the-
right hand and repeat after me. Do you, Tara Ramsey Hunter, solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as member of the Board of Education of the Middletown City School District, Butler County, Ohio,
Middletown City School District,
to the best of your ability
to the best of my ability,
and in accordance with the laws now in effect
and in accordance with the laws of the
and hereafter to be enacted
and hereafter to be enacted
during your continuance in said office
during my continuance in said office
and until your successor is elected and qualified.
until my successor is elected and qualified.
Congratulations. Thank you. If anybody else wants to come up to the side, we'll take a picture. Let's see if I can take Dan's job. All right, smile, everyone. Okay.
And Carrie's.
Yeah.
Okay. So Carrie up.
Fantastic.
Good one.
Come on, guys.
Somebody wants me to use your
Dan. Keep your mom's jacket down. Nobody wants to see you.
Together, guys. Mr. Rainey first.
cheese.
What you talking about?
Guys, you ready? There you go. Very good. Yeah.
Go well.
Before moving on to our agenda item, I'd like to congratulate Ms. Tara Ramsey Hunter on joining the board. We thank her. When we interviewed a variety of talented people in Middletown that were excited about the opportunity to serve, Tara, her family, thank you to her family for sharing her on Mondays and whenever else we'll have meetings. I know the family well, and I know Tara well enough to know that she'll do a wonderful job serving on the Board of Education. We thank her. We look forward to working with her. And we have some big decisions to make, and so you're going to jump right into it from the very beginning. And so thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for asking me.
All right, we ready to roll? All right, is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments, concerns? If there are none, then Mr. Bertram.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart?
Yes.
Mrs. Shiver?
Yes.
Dr. Urso?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hunter Ramsey?
Yes.
All right. On to public participation. Does not appear to be any this evening, and that will take us to our, I guess, main event presentation this evening, our 5-year forecast and our treasurer, Mr. Bertram.
All right, before I get started, I do have somebody to my left tonight.
Oh,
And
we did
this is Mandy Nicholas, our payroll supervisor, who I stole from Creekview Elementary when she was a building secretary there 5 years ago now? Well, I took you 3 years ago. You were there 5 or 6 years ago. And I brought her up here into payroll since then and promoted her to supervisor. And she's been working with me about the last 2 years. 3 years? That's what she means, 3 years. I'm working on getting her treasurer's license. This is one of the functions that we want to show all prospective treasurers. And although she's already got her license, she got that about a month ago. Very proud of that. Getting her in here now to see this side of it. So she's doing a great job. I'm happy to say that she has interned with me.
Yeah, welcome.
Prepare to be dazzled.
Yeah.
See there? I need my glasses. You can tell them where. All right, welcome to the 5-year forecast. And I'm proud to say I have some guests to follow along. Usually everyone leaves after we do introductions and so forth, and you're welcome to feel you have to stay. But if you're here, I'm glad you're here. So anyhow, 5-year forecast is something that we do twice a year. November it's due, and then it's due again for an update every May. And November is the first one of every new fiscal year. So this is a 5-year forecast for fiscal year 25, school year 24-25. All right, and again, I've been doing them a little different each time, see if I get a reaction from you, see what you like or don't like as I do these presentations. So stop me anytime, ask questions as you go. You do have the information in front of you on the green folder, and I've given you a few other slides that aren't going to be on here, but kind of give you a highlight of where we are with the 5-year forecast. That's the monthly report, and I'll get into that one later. That's a new one, that 5-year report. But anyway, projected general fund revenue for fiscal year 25. I told you we're almost $1 million general fund district. We're at $95,118,000. Projected general fund expenditures, $91,952,000, nearly $92 million. And projected gain for the year means cash over expenditures. We're looking at $3.1 million, which is always good news when we have a positive cash flow at the end of each fiscal year. All right, projected revenue, the analysis is 39% of our funding comes from local taxes, which everyone feels the pain in the local taxes, especially as they've increased here recently. We receive 50% of our funding from the state, and then we have a 9% all other general fund revenue, which is a combination of 15, 20 different items. Projected expenditures for the year. Staffing is always the most expensive. That includes benefits, and we're sitting at 66%. Most school districts run anywhere from 70 to 85, 90%. We're a little less than that because we outsource transportation and we outsource our food service department. where other districts may or may not do those things. Purchase services, another large area, which includes utilities, anything we purchase out from the ESCs for additional services coming into the building, we're at 26%. Then all other expenditures, which is supplies, materials, maybe some capital, will be just 7%.
Randy, if you did factor in busing and food services, would personnel cost, would it be, any idea what that would be in terms of percentage?
We would add in, not all of it would be labor. Labor would probably be, I'd say 5% of that. It would add 5% to the staff there, so we'd be at about 71, 72%. So we'd still be at the lower end. Good question. All right, here is a little chart that I decided to add in, and want to talk about salaries and benefits. When you look at the chart, in the orange is the benefits that we pay all of our staff. In the blue are the salaries that we pay all of our staff. And as you can see, we maintain 24 to 26%, just under 26%, and that hasn't changed much in the 10 years. It fluctuates up and down, so we're doing a good job of maintaining salaries and benefits at a pretty even keel. I always say benefits seem to rise faster than salaries, and as you can see, we're going to see a little bump in benefits quite likely throughout this forecast. Because of COVID, I still don't see any good data telling me we could get back down to the 5-6% a year increase. So I still have it between 8 and 10 factored in throughout the forecast. But overall, we are doing a good job of keeping those costs even keel. Projected revenues versus expenditures start on the right. You can see the orange is our total revenues. As long as that's up and above the red, we're doing great for total expenditures. And what that's going to do until we get into year 29, that's going to increase our cash balance reserve. Cash balance reserve is the same thing as the state uses for the rainy day fund. We do have a cash policy that we must have a minimum of 10%, and we're running between 30 and 38% through this 5-year forecast. And that is something, when I came on board, where we're well below that 10%. We're at critical mass as far as not having cash on hand. We did implement that policy of 10%, and it's something I want to come back to the board and talk about getting that up to 20% to have that buffer. The state funding can really drive a number down, so we have more time to react. If they change the funding stream, or the funding dollars are willing to put into the funding stream, that could have more.
So Randy, the 10% is the mandate, which you're required to
Yes, if I
maintain by the state, but
Not by the state, it's local. The state doesn't require that policy. Most school districts have them now. 15, 20 years ago, there's probably a handful of districts that have them. So when I came in here, I said that's the first thing we need to do. We need to put one in place to CYA and to make sure that we're watching how much cash balance we have so we never get down to the low point that we have.
and so our desired percentage is what, did you say?
Most CFOs will tell you anywhere from 20 to 30%. 10 is really low, but 10 was a big goal for us back in 2014 and 15 when we started to implement that. It only took us a year to get there. We did really well to get there initially, and we've been going up since then. But I think 20, my opinion, should be the low standard, the low bar. Just in case
It's
anything
20, okay.
catches fire, we do have a little room to wiggle. And the way we operate that, it's 10% of expenditures. And if I see 3 years out, we're going to dip below that 10% currently, that's when we start having a conversation. What are we going to do to get us up above the cash reserve policy? Either we raise revenue, we cut expenditures, or do a combination of both. But it helps us be fiscally responsible as a school board and a school district.
And when you get below 10%, you're in emergency status.
There's not a technical status of that unless the state declares you an emergency status, like Mount Healthy is now. But I hope we never get to that, even the fiscal caution or fiscal watch. That's why I think a minimum 15%, but ideally a 20% cash reserve would keep us off the radar.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
That cash balance, like, where does it sit in regards to And then, I guess to follow, a district our size, our cash balance, is that high, low, average in regards to a district that has?
Last year, when I looked at that, we were probably in the bottom 25%, even though we were carrying 25 to 28% cash balance. There were a lot of some districts that had 100% cash balance. I never recommend that. That's too much. Your taxpayers have probably paid you too much, in my opinion. That's somewhere you've got to find a good balance that you can operate and feel safe operating, but still be able to spend the dollars when you need to spend the dollars. Drive it back down to the kids. But when you look at a district our size, district's relative. That's why I like using a percentage, regardless if you're a $20 million district or you're a $200 million district. We'll look at cash on hand by days, looking at it in that format. I always think it's a good idea. You have 3 months worth of operating. And 20% isn't quite 3 months, but it gets a lot closer to 10%.
And it lives where? Getting back to
Where?
Yeah,
I mean, where did go ahead.
It's a,
Does it live in the general fund, or does it, are you?
well, what I'm talking about here, that it'll climb up to 38 million in 2028, just above that, all things being equal. The money's invested, that's the question.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But altogether, we're probably sitting on $50 million right now, total cash. Again, that money's invested.
Okay.
Pulling great returns right now, since the interest rates have gone up the last few years. Yeah. I'm estimating about $2 million a year returns. All right, here's an interesting stat here. Annual change in revenue. Our historical change, and this chart's kind of skewed because these show all 4% here, but our historical change has been 3.87%. Moving forward through the next 5 years, we're looking at 3.84. So nothing's really changing on what we're expecting for additional revenue on average year over year, just under 4% increases. And because of the state funding, the fair state funding model coming into play for us, 4% is very good for an average revenue increase for districts. Not most districts can say that, but because of our high poverty, low values in real estate, and low household incomes, that's why we see a nice little bump in the revenue year after year. And that's actually working like small levies for us. But that's not always going to be that way. I'll show you that too as we go through this forecast. When you look at expenditures, now there is a big difference here. Our historical change in expenditures has been less than 0.5% over the last 5 years. Reason being for that is when we went into COVID status, we received a lot of ESSER funding, a lot of federal funding to help prop us up, to give us something to expend. And I've been able to take a lot of our staff, move them over into the federal funds, pay for them out of there and not out of the general fund that you see here. So we had those staff, we just paid for them a different way, so it didn't take from the general fund. But now that we've moved them back, and as you remember, we moved about half that staff back for the next 2 years, this year and next year, from the ESSER dollars, we're seeing a lot bigger bump in the annual expense changes. We're going from that 0.5% up to nearly 7% in increased costs over the next 5 years.
And you had that increased cost factored in?
Yes. Yep, everything you see here is within the forecast data.
you said the historical annual expenditure change prior to COVID and ESSER dollars, what was it then? Was it still 0.5%?
Well, no, it would have been higher than that back then. I didn't look at that. I imagine we were at 2%.
So 6.8, still high from what it was prior to COVID.
Yes, but out of the next 5 years, it's inflated by the first 2 years, having an additional 50 staff members that we're paying for.
So what would that number be if that's not, would it be
I would
pre-COVID
say
trends?
No, I would still say we're at 4.5. Yeah.
Okay.
4.5. Probably a good guess. Now, we have to remember where inflation is today and where it was as well. Inflation is still sticky. We're not getting down to the 2.5% benchmark that the Feds would like us to see. We've been over 3% or higher for the last 43 months. So inflation is very sticky. conservative when we go out and build the forecast. I don't expect it to stay at 6.87, because as we get out, you'll see where we have a deficit spending in the final year. We're going to react to that before we get there. Most likely. Not that we have to. There's the days cash on hand. As you can see, 2021, we're under 100 days. We've been over 100 days since then. This is based on a 365-day calendar, not on a work calendar. So 120 days gives you 3 months worth of cash. So we're just over that 3 months of cash. But that gives you a 25% carryover. Just want to look at it that way. So we're in good shape there. And at 29, you can see it making a drop. And again, 29. Not that I want you focused out there, but you will see where we have deficit spending in fiscal year 20. All right, looking at our enrollment. It bounced a little bit. We saw a little increase. Again, it's skewed. I don't really like the way it's set up with the 6,000 students down to 5,550. But anyway, you can see where we had a drop once we had COVID. It came up after COVID a little bit. Before COVID, it dropped. And then 2023, we saw it bounce back up about 100 kids. This year, we were trending like we were going to be close to 6,000 at the beginning of the year. But once all the data came in, we started to see the enrollments out, started factoring them in. We're going to be down 5,800, 5,750, somewhere there is my guess. We're still getting quite a bit of enrollment out there. Most of the kids that are out, I assume, will be out. But we still have an influx of kids coming in. It's flatline.
Does this take in consideration, I'm sorry to interrupt, any of the information, like the city has mentioned, you see some building in the community, does it take into consideration any forecasted residential growth?
I haven't yet, because I haven't seen the residential start. Maybe once I start seeing it, once I see the homes being built, then maybe I'll consider, depending on the type of construction it is. The ones, I see 2.
Yeah, I think I've seen 3.
Oh, it's up to 3 now.
I think I see
But I don't
3.
see families moving in, I don't see
Yeah.
kids. I know we have another development that's going to go on over closer to the Walmart area, which some of that
Yeah.
should be in our district. Again, I think that's being built for the 50-plus age
Gotcha.
group, is what they're looking at in that group. But it wouldn't be any significant numbers at this point that we need to worry about. Now, Mrs. Hauser shared some data with you tonight. I know some of you are overwhelmed with all that fresh data. You'll see an enrollment projection in there that's different than what I have up here. The enrollment projections she gives you are butts and seats. The projections I worked on are based off of full-time equivalency funded students. Even though we may have a button seat at Butler Tech, a button seat at the high school, if they're taking 2 Butler Tech courses, I'm not showing them at 100%. There's 2/7 of their day they're at Butler Tech. I'm not getting paid for those kids. So my numbers will always be lower than the numbers that she's showing. And they're showing them, coming down about 300 kids over the next 10 years. And as you can see, I'm still flatline, but I will work with those numbers now. We have good data, which we just saw today, the final report. So this may change in May a little bit.
And so do we attribute the decrease in enrollment to what happened 2020, students not coming back in the building, homeschooling and vouchers, or what?
No. I think we got some of those students back, okay? But once they started dropping here, what did the state of Ohio do to us?
Introduce the voucher?
Vouchers. Yeah, I think vouchers have definitely some
Largely.
role in that, but I can't see that data. That data's not available to us anymore. I hear that it will be at some point. They're still working on how they're going to roll that out to see how many have left us that are in our school district. There's no way for me to get that.
So Randy, with the change in the vouchers, with the vouchers going 100%, are we going to see does this reflect the dip?
Until we see lumber pull up to the parochial schools, I think we're flatlined as far as the vouchers go. What the state's doing now, they're done as far as the district kids that we had to pay for at one point. That money now just rolls directly to the parochial schools, the private schools they go to. used to come to us, we were funded for the student, then the money
In
came
and back
back
out,
out.
uh-huh.
So that's how we used to see it. We no longer see it that way. The vouchers, they're at $980 million in vouchers, I think, this past year, almost $1 billion. A lot of that new money went from like 640, 650 the year before to $1 billion, 650 million. The next 300 million was actually the vouchers that the state is paying for, supposedly not coming out on the back of education. And those are the universal vouchers that those kids never attended our schools, and now everyone qualifies at one level or another. So those are the new vouchers now. They're not kids that ever attended our school. We didn't lose them. They just paid
So
for
they're
them.
different.
State budget.
You can also add on the homeschool. Homeschooling's changed and the requirements for homeschooling have changed also at the same time. So that all comes into play.
A lot easier to homeschool.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me, it's home education.
Oh,
If you-
sorry, I should know better.
We
Yeah.
were on the policy committee
Yeah.
for a long time, and we know that that's called. it's
Home
not
education.
homeschool, It's home education now.
Tomato, yeah.
We want to use the correct words.
And because the restrictions aren't as rigid as they used to be, then more people can.
I don't think there are restrictions.
There aren't restrictions. It's an
So
email.
It's just,
Right. So they've all changed at the same time. Yeah.
thank you.
All right, so with that data, I was curious to how this, our enrollment changes, how are we compared to all the other public tech schools? And as you can see, and this is just from 23 to 24, one school year to the next, from the school year before to last school year. And we're right here in the middle, and we're down about 2.8% in 1 year on our enrollment. And New Miami, 4.78, Ross, 5.84. They had levy issues, I think that's why they lost them at Ross. And then 4.22 at Helena, more levy issues. And then Hamilton at 3.05. The only two districts that saw a slight increase of a 0.5% were Lakota and Monroe. And Fairfield and Madison were down a little bit as well, but we're right in the middle. We're not losing the most, we're not gaining any, but sit right in the middle. I thought that, when I saw that, I was actually a little pleased. I thought we'd be towards the bottom of that. So that's another thing telling me we're not losing kids anymore to parochial schools. It's whole free flow. And birth rates, I think, is causing a lot of that, because birth rates are way down. All right, something else that I found very interesting, I think I shared this with a few of you, it really has nothing to do with the forecast, it's just showing you our demographics a little bit. For the first time last school year, the white population in our school district dipped below 50%. It became the minority compared to all the other races in our school district. And the other thing that is worth looking at, we'll see it this year, we don't see it last year, but when you look at African American, they were 18.83. Hispanic, 18.55. We think that with the kids we've gotten in, we're going to see that tilt, that the Hispanic community is going to be the second largest population. It's just data. Just wanted to share it. I got new fancy software, and I might go use it to learn this stuff.
So
Looking at-
white students are still the majority, but they just dip below 50%.
They dip below 50%, yep. So we do have a good blend. So enrollment by grade level, just again, more data. You can see the earlier grades, we have the higher enrollment for now, and then it slowly decreases from the third grade on down to the high school. And looking at 1 year to the other, you do see fluctuations a little bit. They cohort, right? Kindergarten becomes first grade, the first grade becomes second grade. You'll see that average. So when you look at it, when we look at first grade last year, they're now second grade this year. So it just moves with them.
Interesting.
more data that I pulled up. Students identified with disabilities. That's a number I know we've talked to you about, and we're always concerned about. We're currently at 18% students with disabilities in our district. When I arrived here, we were probably at 15 or 16%. 18% is right in line with what most districts have in disabilities as well. It seems to be a standard number. Some have been as high as 20, and others are as low as 15 or 16. The 18 seems to average. Disadvantaged students, that's hard to tell because the kids don't fill out forms anymore to see if they qualify for it, since we're 100%, but the state shows us at 98%. I don't know how they get the other 2%. And again, it'd be hard for me to even guess how many are actually, if they had to fill out forms, would be low reduced or 100% free reduced. But it'd definitely be a high number. It'd be on the higher.
What is the threshold? Is it 72, like to qualify?
70, I believe.
It's 70%?
Yes.
And so once a district reaches 70%, then the entire district is covered under the free and reduced lunch program?
That's correct, yes.
And so do we measure how close to 70% we are to see in
Well,
terms
you're
of
good for
compliance?
4 years. Once you qualify, then there won't be another test until you get into that 4th year to see if you qualify starting over for you.
The last time we were tested, do you know what we were?
Oh, boy. I want to say when she tested, we were still in the 80s.
In the 80%?
When she tested.
Randy,
Yes.
the students identified with a disability, are those students necessarily in our buildings being,
Not all of them.
some of them are the ones that go to special programs too?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah, but
okay.
there are students, so they are.
Okay.
We do get funding for
Okay.
those kids, so they count for us.
Okay.
And within that data, it's the whole
Okay.
continuum, like from speech therapy all the way to where there is a need for a full-time aide.
Yeah, Category 1s to Category
And
6s.
so that takes everyone into,
Yes.
So is it all physical disability, or is it students that are on IEPs and across the?
All IEPs.
so that's the
Yeah,
number of
so
kids
it
that
could be,
have an
right, it
IEP.
could be a speech IEP, it could be a physical IEP, yeah.
So that's a lot of work knowing that we have 100+ kids on IEPs.
Debbie, do we know, like, the distribution in terms of level 1, 2, and 3 in
Mhm,
terms
we
of?
have that. I could share that with you.
Just curious.
Just don't know it off the top of my head.
You don't know?
No.
No.
I know where to get it.
Don't want to scare you with this. Again, we're conservative. You can see how much we spend per pupil. And I should have done one with state average or comparable districts. It's too late now in here. And you can see where our numbers dropped right after COVID, down to 12,269, 12,752, 13,761 per child. And again, this is based off the general fund. We spend more than that when you include all funds, but because we moved so much of our funding to the ESSER dollars, they're not included in that number. All in, we're about $16,000 per student, I think, this past year, to give you an idea what the difference is using federal grants. So that'd been 2024, probably $2,500 to $3,000 more all funds.
So this is the cost to educate one student?
That's what it costs to educate our student per year, the average student.
So does that take the number of total students by what we spend and divide?
Yes.
So it's an average, and so we of course have some students who are more costly
Yes.
and other students
I
that,
think we had 6 students last year that were over $100,000.
and so that skews.
Yes.
Mhm.
And again, with inflation running higher, and I do have a number here, the annual inflation rate for the last 5 years averaged 5.67%. And remember, CPI, our feds want us to be at 2 to 2.5%. General guidelines usually 2.25, 2.3%. So I still have factored in higher inflation rates. You know, I used to average in 2 to 3% for supplies, materials, capital, and so forth. But I've got 4 and 5s in there right now until I see it come down under 4 pricing from the feds. So again, we get those numbers down, we're going to see better numbers on the next forecast if we see the data coming in to show us. And I will tell you, even though we look at these numbers, a lot of our similar districts last year were well above $15,000. We're very efficient. We're doing a very good job. And happy to see that as well. You can look at it in a couple different ways. But I think we did a good job giving them the biggest bang for the buck. Daily cost per pupil, we're just talking about what it costs to educate a student for a year. When you take in our general fund, we spend $88 per pupil. That's probably cheaper than daycare out there. I know my kids have long been out of daycare, so I can't verify that. Anyone in here that can, let me know how much it is a student. But when you take that $88, if we had them for 8 hours, we're basically charging the taxpayer $11 per hour for each student that we have. And of that number, 23% of it is coming from the residential property owner, and the rest is coming from the state and federal funds. I know some of you do like to compare May forecast to the November forecast. And what I can share with you is on the revenue side, we came in higher on the general property taxes by about $400,000 on average going across the board. We came in lower on tangible personal property taxes and came in even lower on state share of local property taxes. That's the reimbursements you get for your homestead exemptions and so forth. And then state aid, we came in a little bit lower on state aid than what I had forecasted. All these numbers, you add them together, we're going to see that regular revenue came in $987,000 above. State revenue came in $565,000 below, for a net increase of $434,000, which is off by 0.5% overall forecast on revenue. If I could be under 2, I'm happy. So, and then when we go to expenditures, personnel services came in well below than what I had expected. And reason is, once we got to May and June, I realized our ESSER grant, our 507 grant, we had a lot more money left in that grant. We didn't spend it all out as we had anticipated for supplies, materials, professional development, all those things, that I was able to supplant some of our general fund dollars and move them over to the federal program. So again, that helped us by nearly $1 million each of the next 4 years by us being able to do that. That supplant is a bad word when it comes to accounting, but this is the only time in my 25-year career you've been allowed to use a grant to supplant. Those days are gone. What's left to spend this year will be spent out by December, and ESSER is done. But we took full advantage of it. I imagine we saved the general fund at least $10 million, if not more, during that COVID period.
Is that in here somewhere? Is that particular chart in here?
I don't think I put it in there. I think
Okay.
I added it later
Okay.
today.
Okay.
I'm going to change it and we'll be up on
Okay.
board docs.
Thank you.
Say Andy's going to drop that in there for me. And supplies, materials, we came in a little bit under because, again, I was able to supplant, take some of our general fund expenditures, charge them off to the ESSER fund. So we did well there, and again, that takes us to expenditure variance. Even though you see that as a negative, that means that much less that we spent than what I anticipated. So nearly $700 million, off by 0.7%, a negative 0.7%. So altogether, negative 0.2% for revenue and expenditures from the May forecast. Questions?
Rattled mine off as we went.
Oh, and I wish somewhere that one chart where the local tax money, I wish that could be put like front and center
Circle grant.
somewhere, because that was news to me when I first heard this, about what % of your property tax goes to the local schools. I think that would be an eye-opener for a lot of
I
people.
could put that in my next by the numbers. in
I
our-
think that would be an interesting statistic.
That is.
I did have a question regarding that one chart too. My understanding, when locally our taxes went up on property, the amount that we experienced as a district wasn't the full amount of the increase.
Yeah.
Can,
For every $3 that somebody's paying in additional taxes, those of you paying taxes, it's good for you to know this as well, because there's a lot of mixed information out there. The way Ohio funds schools, if we have I'll just use $1 million as our total property valuations. If that goes up by 40% like it did on this last evaluation, it went up to $1.4 billion. The state of Ohio looks at us, they're paying us X amount when we're $1 million district, and they say, okay, you're getting $600,000 in state funding. Once you increase your local value to $1.4 million, the $600,000 is going to drop now, because in the eyes of the state, we're a richer district because our values are worth more. And that's what's happening. And it's phased in over 3 years when you add property valuations in, the way the funding works. So at the end of the 3 years, for those $3 in additional taxes you pay, the school district gets 1, the state of Ohio keeps 2. So what I call it is, $3 go in the front door, state of Ohio sneaks in the back door and takes 2 away from us. So we're only seeing $1, state of Ohio seeing $2 of that increased property tax.
so when you see that pie chart and 57% state funding, 35% local tax, and so have those, I think that was slide 3 or 2, have those percentages changed? One more back, I think.
They have changed. I didn't look to see how much, Chris, because the model did show me this from last year. I didn't use this data to do last year's projections. But yeah, this number, as we get richer, that 57%
It's gonna go
will get
down.
smaller. Yeah, that's fair to say, absolutely. And because we're still gaining money from the state, it's not dropping as much as if we were flat funded. I will tell you, when we get into year 4 and 5, let's see, and you've got it on the assumptions that I gave you. That's not the document, I got a page over it. In the nice purple document, on this page.
The one that's revenue sources?
Yeah, and then I want to look at the state. Unrestricted state aid on page 9. You can see we were flat funded in 20 and 21. 22 it dropped because that's when they changed how they funded us, where the students, we used to count all students that had vouchers as ours, so we count them in enrollment in 21. We received revenue for them, but then the state came in and took out the voucher dollar amounts from us as well, not necessarily an equal value. Where we're paying, I'll tell you, we get about $6,500 per student from the state, and if they came in and did it that way, and they went to John 23rd charged $7,500 per student. I'm not sure what they're charging now. I know it was about the $4,600 when the voucher started, when they were that low. They would take the whole $7,500 from us. So they take more than we actually receive from the state, which is true for any school district. We do well on the state funding compared to others because of our demographics. I can tell you Centerville, they get $1,500 per student, and the schools they have there, their vouchers go out at $7,500, so they lose $6,000 per student when a student chooses to go to a private school. So, and me being the conservative I am, that's one of the big problems I have with the way we do vouchers in Ohio. It's not, I don't think it's fair to the public schools that it's creating 2 forms of schools, a have and a have-not system.
So it's the public tax dollars that are funding the private schools then, if you look at it that way?
It's all tax dollars, absolutely.
So it's
Regardless
kind of a
the-
public school then?
Pardon me?
Would you define that as a public school then?
Well, that's a question I've asked many legislators. I said, okay, if you've got 10% of your kids now on vouchers, and that goes up to 20, steady increase in revenue, and most of that is state-funded revenue that we're receiving because we're phasing in that new fair school funding formula over a 6-year period. But once that funding is done, you can see we're flatlined in 28, 29. Our little levies, as I call them, will stop unless there's a big bump in state aid. They increase the amount it takes, the base amount it takes to educate a student. So that's something just to keep in mind that will eventually happen for the district. It's, as most districts, that's what happens.
And that works if fair funding, if the fair funding model continues, continues as it was presented, which there is no guarantee that there may not be changes in that
We're in the
model.
4th year of a 6-year phase-in, so we're in the 2nd year of the 2nd biennium that this has been implemented. You're going to start hearing chatter in January, February, March about the next budget. And when we were up at OSBA, I sat in a session where the economists thought that we may be flat funded for the next biennium, because the state funding is now, the state revenue was $1 billion short last year, and they've anticipated $1 billion short the next year. With education being one of the largest portions of their budget, will they flat fund us, which will change these numbers
Which
drastically
could change
as
it,
well.
yeah.
Yeah, certainly something to look at. And then the other thing I wanted to point out to you, obviously, is in year 28. And you'll see that on the 5-year forecast that I gave you. We deficit spend by $4.2 million in the final year. Again, I think not to worry about that year. We'll make adjustments in the next 4 years. And, I'll keep it, as we see that coming in closer and closer to the year we're in, that's when we start to take caution to it. And I will say last year, we had it in the final year at about $2 million because of the swapping we were able to do with the ESSER funds. It pushed it out an additional year. All good news. Any other questions? I'll try to talk longer than I thought I would. Can you ask me questions? Sarah?
A lot to consume.
It is.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, Mr. Bertram, I'll give you a second to get situated.
Appreciate it. Give me straight up.
All right, you good? All right, thank you for the forecast. Appreciate it. You do a nice job. That brings us to the consent agenda. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, things to highlight within the consent agenda for this evening?
I've got one thing. It was the first report you went to, probably because I laid it on top of your stack. This is available to you. I had it in, I think one other month, about 3 or 4 months ago, and I wasn't real happy with what I was tracking. But if all the reports that we lay out when you go to board docs, you probably have no idea what to look at. It's just a bunch of numbers to you, it's important numbers. But if you now look at the monthly financial report, it's a quick 6-page report that lets you know how we're doing from July to the previous month of the board meeting. So this is data July through October. And easy visuals, it's something to look at, and you always know I'm being transparent.
Is this on board docs, you said?
It is on board docs now, and
Okay.
it's listed as monthly financial
Okay,
report.
okay,
And I think it's the last one, not
Okay.
they'll always be there.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Just like to take a couple minutes to highlight the contracts that are in the consent agenda, just for learning. So we have a contract with Circle Tail, that's for the pilot for the therapy dog at our middle school. That's between the months of January and May. No obligation, it's really just outlines the relationship with piloting the therapy dog. This is our 3rd therapy dog in the district, so we anticipate that's going to go quite well. Next contract you see in there, we have 4 of our high school staff members attending an online training for master schedule building. You see that contract, and then you also see a contract where we have Cincinnati Shakespeare Company coming in to work with our theater students at the high school. So we have two different contracts for Cincinnati Shakespeare. One's for 900, which is 3 sessions that have already been completed in October. One for 300, which that session is due in January. Then you have your personnel agenda on the consent agenda this time.
Thank you.
Mhm.
It's exciting to see the therapy dogs. I
They're
know
going
that
well.
the staff, students, of course, enjoy and appreciate them. It's nice to see that continue to get rooted. Any questions, comments before taking a vote? Or Ms.
Who will have access to the Shakespeare, oh, that just be kids in theater? or-
Theater class, yes,
Okay.
Miss Scout's theater class.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
All right, Mr. Bertram, I think we're ready to vote.
All right. Mrs. Stewart?
Yes.
Mrs. Schreiber?
Yes.
Dr. Urso?
Yes.
Mrs. Ramsey Hunter?
Yes.
And Mr. Moore?
Yes.
All right, wonderful. Moving on to human resources, there's a contract with Frontline Central Software System. Is there a motion for approval?
So move.
And a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Anita. Mr. Bertram, I recall you gave me a good overview on this on
Yes.
Wednesday. Could you give the board kind of an update on this?
I certainly will. When I arrived here, and back in the days when we had Mr. Gerhardt as our HR director, they had a need for software, and they looked at a lot of different software, and they found a software that other districts were starting to use called PeopleWorks. And that software it started out being a decent software for us back in its time, but it's never advanced. They've never lived up to the promises they said they were going to do as far as developing that software. So when Shannon O'Connell moved over from my office over to HR's office, that was one of the things that we said she needs to do, work with Mr. Edwards and Mrs. Farmer and find a better software that talks with my payroll, and that's where People Works, and I'll tell you, I called it People Quirks because it had more quirks than works to it, where we had to enter data, the same data over and over again. HR would have to enter theirs, we'd have to enter ours, and sometimes we don't enter it the same way, and that's where a lot of the rub would come. So they looked at different software, and they looked at Frontline Central. Frontline is the software that we use for other applications, one being my 5-year forecast, one being our student services software, not student services, our staff absent software, and
The applications for the school district.
school district applications. Thank you. Mandy actually knows it better than I do. She gets to work with it every day. And so looking at it, we're replacing the PeopleWorks software with the Frontline software. It's a little more expensive per year, but it's got a lot more things that it's capable of doing for us in the long run. We did check with references, Mr. Sotzing being one of the references, because he had it with him in Lebanon, and he said it was really good software, so we felt very good switching to that software.
Thank you for that. Any questions? If there are none, then Mr. Bertram, ready to vote?
All right, Mrs. Schreiber?
Yes.
Dr. Urso?
Yes.
Mrs. Ramsey Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
And Mrs. Stewart?
Yes.
All right, under business, there is a contract with First Financial Bank to be approved as the bank depository. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, Verlina. Again, Mr. Bertram, could you just give a little insight as to why the change?
Yes, we had a contract with Chase Bank, and it was a 2-year contract, and we gave everyone the ability to extend those for another 3 years once we enter into these agreements. And Chase worked for us, but it was the end of the 5 years, and I always think every 5 years it's a good time to put out another RFQ, especially in a business that has a lot of technology changes. So we put an RFQ out. We had 4 banks respond to that RFQ, and after looking at them, there were 2 clear RFPs that were above and beyond the other 2, and that was First Financial Bank, and Chase was still a good competitor. But the big difference between First Financial Bank and Chase, one, First Financial has 2 banks in the area. Chase only has 1 within our school district boundary, so that's helpful for our secretaries and athletics that makes those deposits. And the second one, First Financial Bank offered us an overnight rate about 3.5 points higher than Chase Bank has been giving us, which means about an additional $150,000 to $200,000 a year in additional savings. And so in other words, it's going to more than pay for the banking that we're charged for First Financial. Will come out ahead, about $150,000 to $200,000 a year. It is a rate that will fluctuate with the Fed rate, but it'll fluctuate up or down with the Fed rate. So if Fed rate goes back up, that rate will go up. Fed rate drops, that will drop. But it will always be higher than what we were receiving through Chase Bank and what the other banks offered us as well. So,
Thank you. Good synopsis. Any questions regarding this? If there are none, then Mr. Bertram?
Dr. Urso?
Yes.
Mrs. Ramsey Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart?
Yes.
Mrs. Shiver?
Yes.
And just a sidebar, thank you for always looking for these types of opportunities. $150,000 to $200,000 is a few teachers.
3 teachers.
Yeah, and so thank you for that. The next item on the agenda is approval of the contract between Middletown City Schools and Pay Schools. Is there a motion for approval?
So move.
Thank you, Verlina. And a second, please.
Second.
Thanks, Todd. You want to do the trifecta, Mr. Bertram, and give us just a brief overview on this?
Money, money, money.
I will, and this is actually a contract that Mr. Sotzing put on the agenda, and Pay Schools is a contractor that works with our food service department. So those, every food service department does work with a software for meal collections and payments. Even though we have free and reduced, we still have meal collections that we get for a la carte additions, staff, and the students that don't pay for their meals still use the software to check in that they are getting a meal. So it is a good recording system for us, so we know how to get our reimbursements from the state. So this is an update from Mr. Sotzing to go with Pay Schools for that service.
Appreciate that. Questions?
I do have a question. It's not totally related, somewhat related. So we contract with Sedesco for our food service. How often do we look at that vendor or vendors in general? How often do we?
Mr. Sotzing just put out, I'm going to take it from you.
No, go ahead.
He just put out an RFP for that one as well. No one competed with Sedexo.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Only one.
And they are good. They
So we
actually-
just put an RFP out this year?
We just did it.
Okay.
Yep. So
Okay.
school year started a new contract with them. And I will tell you, the way that they have their food service set up, we bring in they guarantee $500,000 a year in profit for our food service.
Why would no one else respond to the RFP?
There's only a couple out there that would, and I just think they know that Sodexo's been doing so well for us that they just felt it wasn't worth their time.
Do students comment? Do they like the food? Or is there any kind of survey as to if the students, I mean,
No, there's no survey, but I will say if you've ever eaten high school lunch, they have such a selection that the students can choose from. There's something for everybody there, so I have to believe that they're pretty happy
okay.
at the high school. If you ever want to go check it out, go have lunch at the high school. It's it's good. It's good. They have
I trust it
taco
is.
bar,
I've
they
never
have
heard too many complaints,
sandwiches,
but I just wondered how that
Yeah.
worked. And I'm wondering
fruits. Yeah, it's pretty good.
if no one's responding to the RFP, it seems like, are we writing the RFP in a way that does not attract anyone else or doesn't encourage any other competitors?
No, I think it's open to any food service, but there's just so few out there. And I will tell you, the one that we used to get that she competed every year would be Hamilton. I'm not going to say the company out loud. And she retired last year. So their new food service director may not have interest.
Okay.
So
All right. Yeah, I was
Sodexo
just
does a great
curious.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do a great job.
All right, thank you for that, Berlina. If there are no other questions, are we ready to vote? All right, then.
Mrs. Ramsey Hunter,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart,
Yes.
Mrs. Shiver,
Yes.
Dr. Urso.
Yes. Under finance, we have our newly presented 5-year forecast. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. One last time, any questions regarding this that percolated over the last 10 minutes? There are none. Then Mr. Bertram?
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart?
Yes.
Mrs. Schreiber?
Yes.
Dr. Russo?
Yes.
Mrs. Ramsey Hunter?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. And again, thank you, Mr. Bertram, for that presentation.
I enjoyed it too.
All right, it looks like it brings us to committee reports. Ms. Hauser, any committees?
We
meet?
did. We had 2 committees meet last few weeks. We had the policy committee meeting. I will say that this is probably our last policy committee meeting because we wrapped up reviewing all of the policies, working with our OSBA rep. And so we are in the process right now of pulling that all together to present to the board in one big presentation of updated policies, which should be coming probably in December.
December meeting
Yeah, so,
for approval in January.
right. Ladies, you want to talk about the policies? Or Nita? Ms. Scheibert?
The only thing I have to add is that Randy said then we'll do quarterly
Yes.
updates as they come
As they come
from.
in.
And we'll probably have one
Columbus.
Zoom with any loose ends that we have
Yeah.
after Kenna puts it all together, and then we'll go to quarterly meetings thereafter. Yes.
Yeah.
So we are
We're
in
getting
line
there.
with everything that legally we should be, and that works in our district.
Yes.
So,
So
no,
we
I
be-
have nothing. And we covered so, I can't even think of all the things.
How many meetings, how many policies?
I don't know.
Right.
A lot of
So
policies.
yes, so we should be in good shape
Yes, I
at the
think
end
so.
of this activity.
I
Yeah.
think so.
Yep.
And
So-
and there weren't a lot of, I mean, we didn't have to make a lot of changes to what was except for
Mm-mm.
updates legally.
Correct.
So we weren't in bad shape the way.
No,
So,
it was just a matter of reviewing.
right.
Re-
Right.
Reviewing and agreeing.
Yes.
And then we also had our city and schools meeting.
Correct.
So where Dr. Urso, myself, Mr. Bertram met with Mayor Slampka, and then the interim city manager, Nathan Cahill. So during that hour, we spent, really that hour spent on updates. We talked about the community center update. They're pretty much on schedule. Sounds like they may even be a little bit ahead of schedule. We talked about, we informed them and caught them up to date on the redistricting, what's going on in our district. We also talked about the importance of the school board voice on their planning commission. So we spent an hour really updating each other from the city and then the school's perspective. Dr. Urso, do you have anything to add, or Randy, you were there also?
No,
That
I
hour?
appreciate the hour meeting
Mhm.
with them. Mr. West was supposed to attend, but had to cancel at the last minute. It's nice to kind of be in the same room, ask questions face to face, understand from their vantage point where and if we can work together and build that relationship. They did mention, why I asked Mr. Bertram about growth in the city around residential. There are some maybe opportunities that would be influential in terms of our future growth. Don't want to show cards. I don't think anything's been defined yet, but
No.
it seems like there's already some preliminary work, which also attests to the value of having a school board representative on planning commission, of which we did speak at length about, and the importance of that, and how we have abatements and other things that we've negotiated with the city. To have somebody on that planning commission is very important. There's a large committee, 6 or 7, Todd knows better than I, to have one voice. It was articulated as a very important voice for us, and had been a part of that relationship for a long time.
74.
1974.
Yeah,
Yeah,
way
74.
before even I wasn't around in that time, and so it seemed to have value then, and it's had value since then. We made a compelling case, hopefully, and that it will continue to have that presence also. So,
I think that's it.
yeah.
Yeah, that was it.
All right, and then that brings us, unless there are no other committees?
Nope, no
All
other
right, then,
committees.
Board of Education reports and activity. Ms. Ramsey Hunter, this is the opportunity that if you have anything to share from our last meeting to now, and of course this is your first one, that you're able to share. There's nothing specific. Sometimes people have things to say. Many times don't have anything to say. All right, well, wonderful. Thanks for joining us tonight. Mr. Moore, anything to share?
Yes, I want to say first, congratulations to Ms. Ramsey Hunter. It's always nice to have new folks here join us and got a chance to meet with your family. It's just nice to see you with your family in a photo like that and to have you join us on the board. So congratulations to you. Look forward to working with you, getting to know you more, and I think you're going to make a nice addition here for the Board of Education. So congratulations to you and your family.
Thank you.
Secondly, I wanted to say thanks to Randy and his team for all the work that's gone into the 5-year forecast. I did also want to mention that I believe this is new software. I see some new graphics and some new things going on there.
I've been learning it, yes.
Okay, so I can appreciate that too. And I actually think it looks very nice with the new simplicity of the budget and highlighting the most important parts. So I thought that was a nice touch to that. So just appreciate the work, and thank you for the 5-year forecast.
Thank you.
Me?
Anything for Lena?
Thank you, Randy, for the 5-year forecast. I said prepare to be dazzled, and I was. You added a lot more color and pop, so thank you. Making finance fun and understandable. I'm starting to get it a little bit, so thank you. Chris did an outstanding job at the Mayor's State of the City. He gave a presentation on the state of education, or Middletown City School District, and did a really good job. So thank you, Chris. It was a full house, pretty much. I think it was very well attended, and lots of support, and it's always good to see the community come out like that. So it was a good opportunity for us to tout what we're doing here at the district. Anita and I attended Capitol Conference, and I'll let her talk a little bit about that, but it was my first time, and I enjoyed myself so much, and it was a well-deserved reprieve for me. I can't say I was surprised, but I really did learn so much. It's a ton of information, definitely something that we as a board should participate in. So thank you for the opportunity to go. We did attend 3 conferences, one on fair funding, one on administrative salaries, and one on, help me, Nita.
Legislative updates.
Yeah, the most important legislative updates. So I'll let Nita talk a little bit about that. But yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And Tara, congratulations and welcome to the board. I'm so glad to see you here, and I'm excited about, I told Tara, I said, you're going to receive far more than we'll ever be able to give to the district. The learning, the opportunity to serve is huge, but I think you're going to enjoy it, and you're going to be such a wonderful asset, so thank you.
Okay. And I repeat everything that was said before me. Again, welcome, Tara. We got some busy work to do. I think you know that. The Capitol Conference was wonderful. Going with Verlena, we solved 1,000,001 problems on the way up and back.
And back,
almost, and
so,
we
yeah.
just did. My favorite of all these things, and I'm finally learning how to pick what's really valuable, was the legislative update,
yeah.
which I also enjoyed last year. And I am happy that we have 3 ladies who are very good advocates for school boards. They
Yeah.
follow these legislators around, and they know every move they make. And they gave us a full update on many, many things. Some they were still waiting for. We have, I can't even name all the House bills, but they follow everything, what's coming and what's going, and have the best interests of public schools at heart, and are working very hard to help us maintain the status that I think public schools should have in the state of Ohio. And the legislative update was well attended, as was the fair funding thing that we went to.
Floor
Lots of
room
people-
only, right?
Yeah.
I said floor room only. I mean, all the
Oh,
seats
yeah,
were
yeah.
full, and
I said, we gotta go
people were
early,
sitting on
because
the
you don't know.
floor.
And, yeah, we got there early, we got a chair. So, I was just impressed with the advocacy up there for public schools in Ohio. They're working hard, so anything we have to do with Ohio School Board Association is a worthwhile investment in time and money, very much so. Yeah.
Very good.
All right, well, thank you. Just want to thank our athletic department, Mr. Faust, Mr. Campolongo, Jana, the Fall Sports Awards. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend, but I do know our fall teams did really, really well, represented Middletown extremely well. There are a lot of young people that were recognized just within the district, outside of the district, on first team, second team, honorable mention awards. And they do a really nice job, them being the athletic department, raising up those players, their families, and the coaches. A lot goes into it. My dad was a high school coach for many years, and how many late nights, driving people to and from practice, buying lunch, buying dinner, all the things people don't always see. I know there's a lot of adults who've wrapped their arms around our young people, and it's not, again, always noticed. And so know that they're appreciated. We appreciate them and all that goes into it. And I look forward to the winter teams, basketball. I love basketball, seeing them take the court and the other teams to go and compete. I too was at OSBA, got to bump into my two friends for a couple minutes. I was there in the morning on Monday and was able to sit in on two different sessions, one on principal leadership, and it was fascinating just listening. I understand how hard of a job that is, to go into a building, to be the leader of a building. Sometimes you're caught in between different forces, and I look around our buildings, and I know we have some exceptional leaders within each of our schools. And to sit and listen and understand from the vantage point of the speakers there, all that goes into that and how the position has changed and evolved across time. Just want to again say thank you to our principals and all that they do to support our young people. The second session I went to was around educating the whole Black child. It was a presentation by the State Teacher of the Year, and prior to that session, I was able to meet some of her students. At OSBA, they have a trade show where they're trying to give away all kinds of stuff, cookies and all kinds of things. And the other side, which I like even better, they have students and little booths that kind of allow you to kind of interact with. And I met this lady's students prior to listening to her speak, and you could hear in them that they were confident, that they understood where their future was going. And I got to think, after listening to this teacher, a large part was paid to her in terms of what she was able to fill them up with. And it was a class on literature that allowed the students to kind of interact with their history, their culture, in ways that was very salient. And I know for me, when you grow up and you learn about the stories that connect to you better, you have you're more motivated, you're more interested in. And it just allows me to think, after looking at some of your charts, when you look at the demographic profile of our district, whether it is that we need to have more attention placed to Appalachian history or African American history or Hispanic history, literature, something that students can really grab onto and understand the stories that are connected with them. I think anytime that we can do that, the better served those students, all of our students, will be, even if that class connects directly to how you see yourself in the mirror, or it doesn't. I think there's huge value. I remember taking courses in college that opened my eyes to different people by sitting through it, and I think that's a powerful part of education, is just understanding different people's path and how that is different for each of us. I want to thank Verlena and Tara for showing up. I know was it Monday or Tuesday night? It was Tuesday night that the state of the city to show up on a Tuesday night, and it is they're nice people. It's a tough crowd to speak to. Everybody's stone-faced, and you're looking out there and you're trying to crack a joke or a smile, and to see friendly faces is really important. And so thank you for showing up. I appreciate the kind words in regards to that. And so I tried to make it really quick. I was told 5 minutes, and I stuck hopefully to the 5 minutes that I was given. But that's all I got. Mr. Bertram, anything to share tonight?
And Chris, when you said tough crowd, you remind me of Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah.
I would say OSBA was an excellent year up there. It was well attended. I didn't see any of you during the conference itself.
Our plan worked.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it worked.
You know, I'm still trying to verify you were there, but I'm sure you were. I attended 3 sessions that were extremely good as well, and really enjoyed it. And Mrs. Ramsey Hunter, we are very happy to have you, and as you get acclimated, always know our doors are open. We're happy to take calls or stop in and help you along the way. And you got big shoes to fill with this role, with the things coming up, and we want to make the transition as easy as we can for you, so please ask.
Thank you.
Okay. And then also, I want to ditto that. Welcome aboard. Your voice is definitely welcomed as a parent, student. Well, you had your daughter graduated from Middletown. Your son's a freshman. So you're a parent, you're an alumni. So that voice coming to the table was much valued, and you're welcome. Any questions you have, just reach out and ask. We'll be glad to help. Like was mentioned, there's lots of learning to be. We are all still learning. So we learn together, and we have big decisions to make, but we're super happy that you're here. So welcome aboard. Also, I have to shout out, we have a high school graduate getting ready to step into the White House. So that is pretty. The last board meeting, we were wishing, our high school graduate good luck, and he was elected to the second highest position in our country. So just want to say congratulations to J.D. Vance. It doesn't matter where you fall, Republican, Democrat, that is still a celebration that one of our own has made it so far. So that's a story of persistence and grit, and also just a true reflection on the Midi heart and Midi rising.
Public education.
And public education, right? So congratulations to J.D. Vance. Also want to give a shout out to, we have visitors in the district this week. We had visitors from the Ohio Department of Education. They came to check out our P2T classrooms once again and our Adopt a Class programs. And also we were able to highlight the reading programs, the Science of Reading, which that was initiated originally from our governor. So we had Ohio Department of Education. We had Cintas there. We had Midpoint Library there, and then we had our maintenance department there, touring Amanda and Mayfield. So just a big shout out there to everyone that opened up their doors for that day. And Randy, thanks for simplifying that 5-year forecast. I will ditto that. The new software made it so easy to follow, and I know all the work that went into that. So shout out to you and appreciation
You will.
for all the work behind that. And I think that's it for and just a reminder, December 3rd is our community meeting for redistricting that's going to be held at the high school. That will be also available through a live stream, but that's at 6 o'clock in the high school theater. And that's all I have.
All right. With that being said, is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second, please.
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Have a good evening.
There we go.